All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I am Keith Lockwood. This is the Peak Performance Summit, creating harmony between mind, body, and nutrition. And today I have with me the amazing Dr. Sam Shay. He's a functional medicine expert, a comedian specializing in energy optimization, brain health, and stress and resilience with 25 plus years of experience. He's created the Neuro-Harmony model, a framework for optimizing mental, emotional, and physical health. Dr. Sam Shay, welcome and thank you for tuning in with us and joining us.
Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate you doing this. It's summits and its cousin podcasts are perhaps the most valuable vehicle of sharing information that's otherwise hard to get. And I'm very grateful for anyone who takes the time, effort, and diligence to put something like this together to educate people at scale. So I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, let's jump in. You have a unique approach to health, combining functional medicine with humor. Can you share a bit about your journey and what led you to this work?
Sure. The condensed version is that I got into humor and medicine, kind of I got into humor, the comedy, the normal way, through tragedy. And that was when I was a child. My parents went through a really horrific divorce. I call it a nuclear divorce, in which me and my sisters were caught in the blast radius. And they did everything wrong, weaponizing the children against each other,
Mhm.
creating this back and forth. And the child had to advocate for himself against the other parent when the other parent's only goal was not the advocacy of the child, but to get back at the other parent through the child. And it was pretty bad. On top of that, there was a tremendous amount of bullying and just explicit public violence at school, and I wasn't protected, and a lot of gaslighting at home, and all these other things led to crippling insomnia, digestive problems, anxiety, depression, and I coped with video games, television, and sugar, and developed a lot of pain syndromes from injuries and so forth. And so I made a decision in high school to reclaim my health that was just decaying. My parents were more interested in medicating me to submission than actually fixing the problems. So I decided to pivot into natural medicine. Originally, I was supposed to be the third generation medical doctor in my family, but I pivoted into natural medicine because the approach for my specific situation wasn't working with a pharmaceutical numbing.
Yeah.
And my and the irony is that my father is Dr. Jonathan Shay, and he wrote two books on PTSD and moral injury. He was the staff psychiatrist for the Boston VA for over 20 years, and his two books, Achilles in Vietnam, Combat Trauma and the Undoing of Character, and his second book, Odysseus in America, Combat Trauma and the Trials of Homecoming, of which I was an editor for one of the drafts when I was 20, because he wanted it for readability, because all of his patients only had a high school education. And to his credit, he wanted to make sure the book was readable by anyone with
Yeah.
a high school education. Now,
Yeah.
and the irony is that in his pursuit of defining and disseminating the term moral injury, and trying to change the culture of the military to make it less prone to creating sustained formative trauma, he caused sustained formative trauma in his son, me. And now it's a very strange experience to deeply respect my father's work. His work is great. I've
Yeah.
I have no issue with his work. I recommend his work to my clients as where appropriate. But one can be a hero worldwide, but a hypocrite at home, and that's
Yes.
that's a tragic lesson. And the 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 commandment, honor thy father and thy mother, it says honor. It doesn't mean obey, agree with, or love. It means
Yes.
honor. So honor, my interpretation, is to learn from those that came before you. So take the good lessons, something to emulate, and take the rest as a cautionary tale.
Hmm.
So I honor my father by continuing on the good work that he did and the way he uh, air quotes raised me as a cautionary tale to not perpetuate that into the future. So it's a very strange experience to share my father's work with the deep, uh, ironic history of me
Yeah.
personally with him. That being said, the reason I share this is the work that the term moral injury, and we'll get into like the kind of the frameworks, but I do want to context that. I mean, uh, there's a number of people on the summit that will be talking about stress for sure, and I want to give a very specific understanding of a type of stress that is very destructive, and that my father articulated in the term moral injury. Moral injury is defined in three separate parts. It's the betrayal of what's wrong in a high stakes situation by someone in authority. The betrayal of what's right. Sorry, the betrayal of what's right in a high stakes situation by someone in authority. So but Dante, for all of his bizarre confections of what his vision of hell is, uh, he got one thing right, that betrayal is the lowest rung of hell. And
Hmm.
the betrayal of what's right in a high stakes situation by someone in authority destroys and erodes trust. And trust doesn't exist in a vacuum. What replaces it is the expectation, anticipation of harm, humiliation, and exploitation. In a word, paranoia. And that when people are betrayed by someone they trusted in a very high stakes situation, it it destroys a platform on which they can have social cohesion. And a way to contrast it, like mere tragedy rewrites your future, but betrayal rewrites your past. That's my term,
Okay. Yeah.
my distillation of my father's work.
Yeah.
Betrayal rewrites your past. It completely rips out all the scaffolding on which you understood the world behind you, and therefore everything forward of you is now difficult to trust. And the way forward, if someone's been deeply betrayed in a high stakes situation by someone in authority, is through community. It's community. And to build
Hmm.
trust requires community, usually people who've been through a similar experience, maybe not identical, but similar enough. And because you can rebuild trust most readily with someone you know has been through something similar. And that's why he never believed in individual therapy for this particular type of trauma, that he wanted group therapy of people who've been through something similar. I believe he's correct on that.
Yeah.
So if someone is having trouble optimizing their peak performance and whatever lofty goals we have for ourselves as being effective people in the world, if there's meaningful betrayal in one's life, it's hard to trust moving forward. And to think about, is it not to think less about what's the special CoQ10 product or goji berry juice or visualization or exercise,
Hmm.
whatever, and more, what is the community? What is the community that I can build in order to become the highest performing person I can in the context of a community? Because otherwise you'll hit a plateau, a ceiling of capacity, because your trust radars will become so activated by the more visibility you get, the more your trust sensors will be firing off.
Yeah. Because now you're thinking about, well, is this person leading from the right mind? Are they going off of the right concepts and things like that?
For sure. So I think just uh, I'm going to be sharing an updated mind body model, and my hope is to share a roadmap for everyone here to see what how you can structure your journey forward into optimal health and peak performance. And I'll share the visual. Oh, let me go back to my origin story here before I go into that. So I went into natural medicine. I I became a chiropractor and was the top student in my class. I took well over 100 postdoc seminars while I was still in school. Was a tutor and teaching assistant while in school as well in the anatomy and neuroscience labs. And I went on then to teach after I graduated, traveled around the country to teach other chiropractors how to pass their national registration exams. So that was teaching pathology, microbiology, anatomy, neuroanatomy, and biochemistry and radiology. And then I went and had an 8-year practice where I did hands-on. I also got an acupuncture degree while I was abroad, and I got into heavy functional medicine and functional genetics. So I was kind of this Swiss Army practitioner where I
Yeah.
was just so cross-trained across nutrition. I was a functional neurologist for 8 years before I went 100% virtual. Right now, I've been virtual since basically the end of 2017. So well before it's fashionable to be on Zoom, I was
Yeah.
on Zoom. Uh, and my so I studied mind body medicine, nutrition, neurology. I trained with an osteopath, a chiropractor, I was acupuncturist. Um, got into functional medicine, functional genetics, and a bunch of other things. So it was this kind of full spectrum, full spectrum integration of all these different modalities. And on top of that, I know don't let the academic veneer fool anyone. I am a professional stand-up comic also. I just have a kind of a dry observational, you know,
Yeah.
shtick. And my comedy is modeled after Seinfeld and Gaffigan and Myers, and it's nothing to do with politics. It's to do with the structure of clean observational comedy that has narrative consistency, that has callbacks and act outs. And so I don't do politics. I don't do cursing. I don't do body fluid jokes. I talk about things in a way that's important topics. I have a full 1 hour special that people can look on YouTube called Neurospicy Love, Life, and Comedy on the Spectrum, because I have Asperger's syndrome. I figured that out like 6 years ago, and I designed a 1 hour comedy show to it's 1 hour I wish I had 30 years ago to explain how my brain worked and how to better
Yeah.
adapt to the normative world. And it was designed to bring normies and Aspies together, or spectrum folk together, uh, to create better understanding and also laugh their heads off, but also talk about the difficult things also
Yeah.
while
Yep.
making it funny. And humor is critical to success because humor is probably the most effective vector of truth that's out there. The people can receive if it's funny, and
Mm.
but usually what is funniest is what's truest. My comedy instructor said, you never aim for funny, always aim for truth. Find the funny in the truth, not the truth in the funny.
Yeah.
And it's quite a philosophical endeavor to write stand-up comedy. That's good and not leaning on common tropes of, whatever potty humor that's out there.
Yep.
And some people are great at that. And I don't look, there's probably at least 2 dozen different types of comedic styles. It's that one's not for me.
Yeah.
So comedy, in fact, I'm going to be speaking at the time of this recording, I'm going to be speaking in 2 months at the American Academy of Therapeutic Humor. That's the same place where Patch Adams spoke. And I'll be doing my full comedy show and then doing a plenary session on how to leverage humor inside your practice to build rapport and to help with patient outcomes. So the humor arrived at the same time as my chronic illnesses starting as a child, because I was watch comedy shows to try to understand, because again I had Asperger's. I wasn't born with social software. I had to learn from ground zero how to interact with people. People could read facial expressions through instinct. I had to learn through algorithm. I had to put it all together. So I had to watch television as like a personal sociology experiment. And I would watch like Family Members, Family Matters, Cosby Show, uh,
Okay. Yep.
uh, a lot for those that remember Nick at Night. Obviously, lots of cartoons. And I did have enough self-awareness to know that Married with Children was an ironic inversion of what a healthy family should be.
Yeah.
And Simpsons kind of was a mixture of, it was kind of dystopian family dynamics and also good family dynamics. So
Yeah. It had
it
a
was
little bit of both. Yeah.
a little of both. It wasn't entirely innocent and wasn't entirely bad either. Um, And I know this, and the heyday of The Simpsons was definitely in the '90s. That was, I think that's when
Oh,
O'Brien was one of the writers at the time. Anyway, we can talk about humor all day long. So humor became a way for me to understand the world, and as a way for me to communicate as well. And uh, and what I learned was that that the humor has a structure. That there's timing, there's timing, there's rhythm, there's structure, and the same thing with health is that there's a structure to health. And what I want to share is the roadmap for how people can understand and coordinate their life going forward. So what I'd like to do, let me pause there, and just because that was quite a narrative. Anything you wanted to clarify or anything like that?
no, that's awesome because that leads right into the next thing is that you created the Neuro-Harmony model. And I
Hmm.
was going to ask, can you give us an overview
Sure.
and how that works for people to optimize their health?
Sure. So people watching, the visual is on the screen here. For those listening, it's think of the Neuro-Harmony model. What it is it's the updated mind-body method. And so imagine for those of you just listening, there's an infinity sign, but then there's a little third outcropping in the shape of a heart that connects right down in the middle. And on the one side of the infinity sign is the mind, the other side is the body. But the thing that connects them both is chemistry in the middle. And that's where we can optimize that through lab testing. So we have the physical body, we have the mental, emotional body. But the communication between the two of them is chemistry, neurotransmitters, hormones, immune signals. It's literally chemicals.
Yeah.
It's not quite a physical. It's not like it's not a physical tissue. It's a molecule that communicates mind and body. And so when people are listening to, uh, you know, whether it's other people on the summit or other podcasts, and they're learning about, oh, this meditation technique, this hypnosis, this EMDR, or internal family systems, or cognitive behavioral therapy, or any other type, or meditation, or whatever it is. And then there's the body side of it, whether it's exercise or diet or uh, getting adjusted, fixing your posture, improving your gait, identifying and removing mold from your environment, looking at your morning and evening routines, um, looking at your sleep hygiene. Those are all that are examined from the outside in, which are extremely valuable. And so this is the lifestyle analysis that one can get is an outside in. Lab testing is looking from the inside out. So we're
Hmm.
actually taking samples, whether it's blood, urine, hair, stool, saliva, cheek swab for genetics. There's an inside out analysis that, when best combined with an outside in analysis, now you have the full picture.
Yeah.
The thing that people miss the most is lab testing. And that's really tragic, because lab testing makes the entire journey more efficient, faster, and long term way less expensive, because now you know what the priorities are, what biochemistry has been damaged, what organ systems are in trouble, and then what specifically to target your outside in approaches. Like, instead of just getting whatever the shiniest new CoQ10 extract is, you
Hmm.
actually know, do you need it or not? And if you do, which one? There's a big difference between someone's just low in CoQ10 versus someone who's got mitochondrial retraction, and they need PQQ to help rebuild the mitochondrial matrix itself. So I know I'm getting a bit technical, just throwing out some
Yeah.
jargon, but the point is, there's over a dozen types of magnesium, to give you an example. There's over a
Yeah.
dozen. So
Yep.
which one do you need? That's a good question. Magnesium oxide is if you're constipated. Magnesium 3 and 8 crosses the blood-brain barrier. Magnesium orotate is best for bone density, increasing bone density, and on and on and on and on and on.
Hmm.
So lab testing will help you get very specific on what you actually need, and also give you the metrics to know when you need to stop something. I mean, one of the things that frustrates me a lot about whether it's pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals, is like, what is the measurement? What are you tracking to know you don't need the thing anymore?
Yeah.
And you can't do that unless you've got testing. I
Yep.
mean, you can estimate it based on your lived experience. You can approximate it, but you really need the data in order to know if you've got enough of the thing. So this is the overview model that this is the big kind of roadmap of mind body lab testing. I am all for all those techniques, whether it's mentioned all like hypnosis, EMDR, meditation, breathing techniques, internal family systems, the work of Byron Katie, cognitive, all those things, creating community, nurturing relationships, building up resilience, grit or whatever words you want. I am all for that. I'm all for digestive better eating habits, better sleeping habits, better exercise habits, better diet, better sleep, all those things. And now we can really accelerate it all with lab testing. And I work with people on both mind and body. That's what I've done for years and years and years and years. But now the lab testing has gotten really precise. And that's what's really exciting. And I feel people can now leverage this to really get to where they want to go. And so the next thing I want to share is the 5 main categories of lab testing so that everyone listening and watching, you will now understand of the framework of how to think about lab testing. So I'm not going to talk about a specific lab at length. I'm going to mention multiple different types of labs, but more importantly is the framework of what are the 5 categories of labs. Then people can start to think systematically about where I should go next. So I'm going to just load up this other.
That's awesome. And I feel a lot of people don't go get labs unless it's their doctor like, okay, we need lab testing to see what, this issue is, instead of you can go get labs and then use that as like a preventative thing. So
Mhm.
those issues don't even come up.
It's not even preventive, it can be optimization. So labs are also, I mean, I've got a couple clients that are doing labs. I mean, they're doing great. I mean, I've got one guy who's an international lawyer, and he's been working with me for what is it, 7, 8 years now, and he just does his labs to just get more and more fine tuned to get peak performance. Its prevention is great, but the benefit is we can also use them for optimization.
Yeah.
So here, I just want to address the 2 big objections people have to lab testing. It takes too much time and it's too expensive. So it saves time net and saves money net. Up front, there's definitely a time investment. For
Yeah.
sure, there's a
Mhm.
financial investment. But over time, it saves time and money because you're not dinkering around with going down the wrong pathway. So
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge there is truth that it costs both time and money, but the time scale is wrong. It costs it in the short term, but it's way more valuable, makes up for it with multiple dividends in the long term. So now here's the 5 categories. Number 1 is hormone testing. This is the one most people are familiar with. So there's 3 main types of hormone testing: adrenal stress resilience testing, sex hormones, and thyroid hormones. Now, most people have heard of thyroid testing, not as many, and a lot of people have heard of hormone testing. Not everyone's heard of adrenal testing. So we'll start with thyroid, the one that people are most familiar with. So most
Mhm.
people, when they go to their Western practitioner, they get maybe TSH, which is called thyroid stimulating hormone. The problem with that is that it's only one of 6 important thyroid markers to check for. Because you can have, and I've seen this when I've lectured on this, I have seen this and I have labs to show it, the data before and after, that you can have normal TSH, but really whacked out autoimmunity to the thyroid. You can have normal TSH, but abnormal, T3 or T4. So the difference between Western testing and functional testing is that Western testing is looking for, philosophically, Is there pathology? Yes or no? Is the organ broken?
Hmm.
Whereas functional is not looking at is it okay or is it broken? It's looking at this gray space in between, and also beyond okay into optimal. So functional testing is looking at, can we get this thing out of not working great to working good and then to working really great. And that's why we need more metabolites, more markers to assess what's going on. So there's six major markers for thyroid: TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, antibodies to what's called thyroglobulin, and you'll see it shorthanded as anti-TG, and then antibodies to thyroperoxidase, shorthanded anti-TPO. Now, you don't need to be, anyone listening does not need to be on a first name basis with all of these fancy words unless you're a Scrabble enthusiast and you want to win the next tournament. You don't need to be on a first name basis with these things.
Yeah.
So, but I just want you to be aware that thyroid's the canary in the coal mine. If the practitioner you're working with only orders TSH, they are not a functional practitioner. That is the dead giveaway. If they only order TSH, they are not a functional practitioner.
Yeah, I
They-
just went and got labs done, got them back yesterday from my regular doctor, and
yeah.
TSH was the only thing on there
Only thing on
for
there. Yep.
thyroid.
Yep.
So
In fact,
all
I
those
got
other things that you just named, I've never even heard of them until right now.
Yeah, if the reality was back in 2014 was the real. I mean, I studied functional testing and all that back in like 2005 and six, but I really, when I was in practice, I really got serious about it in 2014 when I was practicing. I was in New Zealand at the time, and there's goiters over there. People don't realize that. So my first goiter, within the first month of being there, this lady came to me a couple years later in 2014. She had a goiter. She had almost every single sign of hypothyroidism. And I mean
Yeah,
almost everyone. Couldn't lose the weight, tired all the time, achy joints, losing hair, losing one lateral third of her, the outside third of her eyebrow, foggy brain, all these things. And a goit, you could see it. You could like
yeah,
small football. And she came to me and said, well, I went to my endocrinologist, the specialist. He did my TSH and said I was normal and that I was just depressed and I needed to go on antidepressants.
oh,
And I'm staring at this woman's goiter. I am looking
yeah,
literally the checklist of hypothyroidism that I asked her to fill out. And it's one of the few moments in my life, clinical life, Keith, where I almost lost my temper. Not at her, never
yeah.
at her. It was at this, the specialist was not in the room, but the specter of him was in my brain. And
Hmm.
I was livid, not at her. And I really had to contain myself. And through gritted teeth, I said, ma'am, I will find you a more appropriate thyroid test. I promise you this. You have been misdiagnosed.
Yeah,
You absolutely have hypothyroidism. There are a bunch of other thyroid markers. Let me get back to you. And I was on a warpath to find a company that had these extra markers, and I did. And that was the beginning of like diving super seriously into adding functional medicine to my hands-on practice, and then now it's become my full-time practice. So thyroid is a very special place in my history from that story, and it's the one that most people can understand because like what happened just to you just now. It's just TSH, and they're not
yep,
checking the other stuff. So these are three other companies. These are three companies: Genova, ZRT, Access Medical, that have these type of thyroid panels. ZRT is a slightly different version of this panel, but they're basically all there. Then we've got sex hormones. And normally, when you go for blood testing from a Western practitioner, they check like testosterone, E2, uh, progesterone, maybe FSH, LH if you're lucky. And that's it. So, but there's like seven types of estrogens you can check for and the entire pathway. And you can check DHEA and you can check DHEA and it turns into its other metabolite, then turns into testosterone. The testosterone turns into estrogen. And then you got another metabolite that turns into a different type of estrogen of DHEA, and of DHEA turns into a different estrogen from a different pathway. And then how does the estrogen detox? And like if it detoxes in the wrong way, that's really bad. If it goes down this way, then that's good. But what if it gets jammed at the methylation level? Like it's all super, it's a map. So instead of just checking a couple markers, why don't you check the whole map? And you can
Yeah.
check the whole map and see, because when people struggle with hormone issues, whether it's women who are struggling with perimenopause or menopause or postmenopause, or men who's when men have their own hormonal shifts around midlife and older, look at the whole playing field, not just a couple it's the same thing. It's the equivalent of just checking TSH in the thyroid.
Yeah.
When you could be checking all these other things, it's the same thing in the sex hormones.
Hmm.
The Precision Analytical makes the Dutch test, which is amongst the most popular test out there. There's some other companies that have their comprehensive hormone panels as well. I think ZRT's got one as well. Genova's got its. So does Access Medical. And then there's the adrenal stress test, where you're looking at taking multiple samples of saliva during the day to check what your rhythm is of your stress resilience hormone known as cortisol. Now, the problem with getting a blood test, I have a whole YouTube video on this, on the problem of blood tests for cortisol, is that you get normal when you get your blood test for cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. You have to get it fasting in the morning on a first morning draw. So you tell me if your stress is going to be normal. If you wake up, you
Yeah.
have breakfast, and you fight traffic to get to a phlebotomist, have some guy in a white coat coming at you with a needle. You really think your cortisol is going to be normal?
Yeah.
Really? So the blood test is useful if you have extreme pathology of the adrenal glands, like it's super high or super low, known as
Hmm.
Cushing's and Addison's respectively. But it's not good for the functional, the gray space. Like how is your ability to adapt to stress? And depending on how it looks, that you can do certain lifestyle nutritional interventions in order to optimize your stress resilience. So that's hormone testing. Any questions on the hormone testing?
No.
Okay. Then the second layer is gut testing. So gut testing is there's three main tests. One is the what I call like the big overview, the most important one. This is checking for hidden infections, everything from H. pylori to parasites to candida to worms to viruses, bad bacteria. It checks for beneficial gut balance, flora balance. It checks for pancreas function, fat digestion, immune system of the gut, like inflammation, gluten antibodies. And these tests are much more comprehensive than the simple 10 to 12 microbe tests you get from your normal Western doctor that are basically checking for like, do you have food poisoning and these other super bad things? And that's it. Like some of these gut tests check, dozens and dozens to a couple hundred of these types of different infections. And the main companies are Diagnostic Solutions Lab, make the GI map. Genova makes the GI effects. Doctors Data has GI 360. And then there's a bunch of companies that have what's called the CDSA, or called the Comprehensive Digestive Stool Analysis. So that's the big test. That's the most important one. And then there's SIBO testing, which is called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This has gotten a lot of fanfare in the past 10 years or so.
Hmm.
It's valuable, but my opinion is to focus first on this big test first, because SIBO could be secondary to some other issues that are found in the bigger test. And then there's food sensitivities and intolerance testing. Um, I think this should be done last, simply because sometimes people do these food sensitivity tests and like everything comes back bad. So like you're left
Yeah.
eating nothing but chicken and celery, and that's no fun.
Yep.
And it doesn't make any sense. How could you be reactive to all these foods? We would never have survived as a species evolutionarily without being able to eat a variety of foods. Well, if you have an inflamed and damaged gut, then everything's going to be reactive, or most everything. And here's why. If this is my arm and I poke my arm with my finger, okay, and then my finger just bounces off. And if I have an open wound on my arm and I poke in the open wound, do I have a finger allergy, or do I have my finger irritating an open wound on my arm?
Yeah.
I don't have a
Irritating an
finger
open
allergy.
wound. Yeah.
That's not a finger allergy. And that's what these uh oh, so
The-
did something on your screen change? Because my computer just did a weird. shifted some things.
The top of it looks a little different, but
Okay,
on your screen.
I don't know what happened. I just hit something and my computer went all weird. What in the world just happened? Okay, give me give me a second here.
Yep. It might have put it into speaker view.
I have no idea. I can't even click on any of my things now. That is super weird. I can't click.
Like you can't like hit escape.
I did.
Huh.
What did it? What just? This has never happened to me before. I've done like 200 casts and. All right. Please pause for dealing with the technical difficulties. What is that? Do I have that music we can play? Dude, 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 dude. Like
Some
Super Mario.
what's that?
Literally. Oh, wait,
Jeopardy.
wait. Something happened. I did
Some Jeopardy music.
some Jeopardy music. Wow. Okay. Um. I do not know what the heck just happened. I think I put my elbow on something and it just altered it. Okay. I'm hitting all the function keys. Okay. I think I can't even click out of I can't even click on a thing to reset. All right, Keith, here's what I got to do. I need to hard reset my computer because
Okay.
I literally can't.
Go.
And we're back. Okay. So, if same thing, if you've got an irritated gut, and a piece of broccoli hits that irritated part of the gut, the gut can only create an immune response. So it's going to appear that you're having an allergic reaction to broccoli when it's really just an irritated, inflamed, damaged, toxic, or stressed part of the gut. And so you want to work with that first before finding any genuine kind of underlying hardwired reactions. And there's genetics tests to see if you've got some hardwired reactions to certain things. So there's a bunch of labs that do um uh but that do that since food sensitivity testing, but I prefer to do the bigger gut test first. Then we've got mitochondria, brain, and liver testing. This is a specialty of mine. I trained in how to read mitochondria tests for 4 years, and the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, it's basically creating all the electricity and energy for you to run everything. If you lived in a house where there's no electricity, just an empty shell, a city without electricity would take 3 days before it turned into Mad Max. So electricity is everything. In fact, most of the things you see in multivitamins are nutrients to run the electricity factory known as the mitochondria. And mitochondria testing is quite complex, and that's why it takes a lot of training. And not many more functional practitioners work with hormones and gut than they do mitochondria because it is a much more advanced type of testing. And this also functions as a broad, um, it also is a broad nutritional thing where you can determine what nutrients you're missing, like specific amino acids, vitamins, minerals, um, fat soluble vitamins, and so on. And so there's a couple different tests. Like Genova has the ion panel. It also has the Nutrivel. It also has the metabolomics. And the metabolomics was designed during the pandemic for this is normally a urine and a blood test, but blood draw, but they created a blood spot version so people didn't have to go into clinics. So it cut out certain markers,
Yeah.
but it's kind of to try to compromise between no need to get a blood draw versus getting some blood markers. So that's the mitochondria testing. And then there's the weird stuff, metals, mold, and Lyme. You can put environmental toxins in there as well. So getting mold testing done, I just had to live, I recently just had to leave my apartment because of toxic mold. So I'm in my whole mold detox process myself. Several companies, Great Plains and Vibrant Wellness, do mold. Metals and environmental toxins. You've got a great mercury test called the Trimercury test here in Colorado, and there's you this checks for like hair, urine, and blood for mercury, and there's because the different types of mercury, they're in different parts of the tissue. Then there's checking for heavy metals, and the reason why heavy metals are bad for people is that at the core of enzymes uh, and at the core are enzymes that run the body that make sure that processes work properly. But at the core of them are computer chips, the big machines, and the computer chip is the mineral. So basically, a good mineral is like a really updated processor in the computer to make the thing run. A heavy metal is like trying to shove a 1990s Microsoft chip into a 2020 computer. It's just going to be slow at best.
Yeah.
And so that's how to understand why metals screw up enzymes. And then there's Lyme disease, which is just a whole it's a whole bird's nest. Lyme's disease is very, very difficult for people. And you can do testing for that. And Lyme is more opportunistic, and it can be very, very problematic for people. And um uh so those are the big three kind of bad ones. Then the last one is genetics testing. Now, this is something that I really specialize in. And I think genetics is one of the most valuable, and I mean that literally, the most valuable tests that people can do. If people wanted to start, they should start with genetics. The reason why is that these other tests I mentioned, stool, mitochondria, hormones, you have to retest them, and every 6 to 12 months or so, maybe 3 months, depending on the thing. Genetics, you get the test once and you've got the data for life. So if you want a test that's going to give you dividends amortized over decades, not just months, then do a genetics test first. And genetics testing, you can figure out, how to achieve your natural weight, meaning through genetics, you can determine like, are you prone to inflammatory water weight gain, hormonal toxic weight gain, or caloric fat weight gain? And then different strategies of what to do to normalize your weight based on your genetics. You can figure out your ideal diet through genetics now. Are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? Trigger foods. Are you genetically vulnerable to gluten, dairy, caffeine, alcohol, histamine, salt, and so on? Like there's all sorts of different trigger foods that people may be vulnerable to that are genetically hardwired. Your ability to synthesize and absorb vitamin D, how genetics affects your eating behaviors. Like some people are genetically prone to overeating because feeling full is not in the stomach, it's in the brain. But the signal comes from the stomach to the brain. If there's a delay in that signal, you don't feel full until much later.
Yeah.
Some people's relationship to the flavor of bitter, which may not sound like much, but if people are averse to the flavor of bitter, they may eat, you know, up to about 100 fewer pounds of healthy bitter vegetables a year if they're just averse to the flavor of bitter. So, and then there's immunity support genes, and then there's also exercise genes. There's another image here that I have to add, that you can now identify what's your optimal performing exercise, how well you recover, and how you can improve the best methodology to improve your VO2 max. So there's genetics around that optimal exercise as well. And I'd say again, like this is the most valuable test that people can do
Yeah.
because you get the greatest return on investment. And this test changed my life. Like I found out I was genetically vulnerable to caffeine, and it was people have genetic vulnerability to caffeine induced anxiety and depression. So
Huh.
caffeine can cause anxiety and depression in a certain percentage of the population. When I've lectured to a group of entrepreneurs on this, they freak out because they think my company runs on caffeine. Ah.
Yeah.
And then there's people that are, there's people who I gave a lecture at a genetics conference a couple years ago, um, on exercise induced obesity, which sounds like a paradox. Exercise induced obesity. It's because I pointed out, and I had a bunch of case studies to show it and all their genes to explain it, that there's certain people that are hyper inflammers, meaning they're genetically more prone to inflammation. So if you do too much CrossFit, for example, and you've got this genetic combination, you're going to get massively overinflamed no matter how much, if you, the more you exercise.
Hmm.
If you over, because everyone's got a different line between like optimal exercise and then over, they cross it and it's over exercise. So now you're net inflamed. And the thing about inflammation is that the chemicals are damaging to the cells and tissues. So the body will retain water to dilute those toxic inflammatory chemicals from damaging your tissues and your organs and whatnot. So you'll start to retain water. And you see these people have like this, they're strong, but they can't really see their muscle definition because it's washed out with water weight. You've seen this?
Yeah.
Like, and like they're frustrated because they're not sculpted and they just work out more and they just don't ever have the definition that they're looking for. It's because they're inflamed. And there's something called I mean it's a cutesy term, but I call it the muffin test. And one of the fastest ways to know if you are likely to have this genetic overinflaming combo is that if you eat half a muffin and you gain 1 to 4 pounds in one day. Now, unless that muffin was last year's regifted Christmas fruitcake,
Yeah.
you didn't weigh it. The muffin didn't weigh 1 to 4 pounds, you know. So what happened is that all the sugars, the toxins, the dyes, the preservatives, the whatever thing leached to the little plastic package thing that wraps the muffin, the
Hmm.
sprinkles, the frost, whatever it is, that causes massive inflammation, and then your body just retains all this water. And that's where the weight comes from. It's not caloric weight. It's not fat. It's water retention. And this happened with my father. My father took heroic amounts of convincing to try, in his case, just one day of keto, because he was
Yeah.
just living off of, toasted bread and toasted cheese. And it took so much convincing. So look, Dad, you can still eat, just have chicken and broccoli and coffee, just don't, no bread, no dairy, and just chicken and broccoli and olive oil and coconut oil, and that's it. And I watched him. I watched him eat that. Like he didn't stray. He had calories. This is very important. He had plenty of calories. It's a very important detail. The next day he weighed himself. He had lost 4 pounds. 4 pounds. Now, remember, he ate lots of calories.
Hmm.
It's just that he deflamed. He deflamed from not eating the pro-inflammatory foods. That's what I'm talking about. So if you run your genetics, you can know, are you prone to being hyper-inflammatory? If you are, there are very specific practical strategies to implement for life to not trigger this overinflammation.
Yeah.
So those are the five categories of testing. We've got hormones, gut, mitochondria, the bad stuff, and genetics. And if people were wanting to start, I urge them to start with genetics. And the genetics programs that I've put together are they were designed to solve the problems that I've seen uh, most of the other genetics companies have, which are they just test so many genes that it's overwhelming, or too few genes that it's too simplistic, and that the genes are not organized and prioritized. And so what people need is a genetics test that will give you just focus on the highest level health optimization genes and put them in order of priority, and then give you the actual stack of what to do in order of priority so you know where to start and where to continue,
Hmm.
opposed to just be overwhelmed by 300 genetics based health tips, which
Yeah.
which is not useful because it's overwhelming. So this is something that I've really pioneered, and something I've really focused on. I also do all these other tests as well, but the genetics is, again, if people want to start somewhere, start with the genetics. Definitely, you can do the other stuff too. And the way they converge is the following. So, functional testing, meaning that the hormone, gut, mitochondria, and the weird stuff, meld, metals, lime, that is a thumbprint of what's happening now. That's what's in your body now. Your thyroid levels, your amino acids,
Yeah.
infections now, what mitochondria function, whatever it is. Genetics is not about what's now. It's about what your optimal is going forward and where are the weaknesses in your system that have to be dealt with because if you don't shore them up, they'll show up. And
Hmm.
so genetics will not tell you what your thyroid level is now. They will not tell you what your level of amino acids are now. They don't do that. That's functional testing. So
Yeah.
the two different lenses into you're looking from the inside out, like from lab testing. They're both incredibly useful. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the most important test that people can do to get started is the genetics test because that is the thing that will give them the most amount of dividends for the longest period of time. And just to finish on the visual, the neuroharmony method, we got the mind body, but in the middle, but connecting it is chemistry. That's lab testing. And the and then shared the five different categories of lab testing. If people want to have, have as much agency in their life as possible to live at a peak performing life, have lab testing involved.
That's awesome. And so with that, the genetics lab package, like,
Mhm.
and what, so if you had your top three tests, like, so your genetics, what would be your next two, or would that be based off of what comes back from your genetics?
Not necessarily. It's not so what's based on it. It's more like what are people struggling with,
Hmm.
and in general, the second priority test in general is a gut test.
Okay.
That's almost always the next best, most generic step to take is that really broad overview gut test. And then if you were to do a second one, I would do it's a toss up really between doing hormone testing, whether it's adrenal, sex hormones, or thyroid, depending on what someone's dealing with, or uh, a mitochondria test. And so there's different, like there's the big mitochondria test from Genova, and then there's a smaller, more condensed version from Diagnostic Solutions Lab, the same company that makes the GI map test. They have like an amino acids plus the mitochondria core, which is testing like the actual factory itself and the amino acids. And that combo is very, very potent. Is it everything? 'Cause it doesn't have the fat soluble vitamins, the minerals, and some of the metals in there, but it's a really good foundation. So that's what I would say. Genetics number one, gut usually number two. Number three is a toss up between mitochondria and hormones, depending on the situation.
Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Well, just some final questions for you. Um, and I know you've said this already, kind of somewhat, but if someone watching today is feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, stuck, what's the first small step that they should take to start regaining, that balance and energy and getting back to like their natural selves?
So the first step is to take the first step. And I know that sounds a little poetic and trite,
Yeah.
taking action is really the next step. And so the having the drive to take action, that's the most important thing. What action to take? Uh it it depends on the person's situation. I'd say um the best option is to start to work with a professional to help guide you because unless you're deeply involved in this space, it's a bit overwhelming to know what is the next best, most effective and winnable and quickest thing to do
Hmm.
unless you're working with a professional or you're at a minimum having some testing to see where to focus on. If I were to give you know the next step for people to take that's free, I would say go to my website and get my 3 lifestyle and nutrition guide. And there I talk about how to have a good breakfast, how to have good sleep hygiene, and a couple other things as well. And if you can get the bookends of your day, your morning and your evening really dialed in, that's going to allow for everything else to work out much better. So your morning routine and your evening routine, breakfast and sleep hygiene, those would be probably the single best generic things that people can focus on to start living a better life. Those two, the bookends of the day,
Yeah.
I would start. And that's why I wrote the 3-day lifestyle nutrition guide, to focus on those bookends.
Awesome. I love that. And your website is drsamshay.com.
Yeah,
Once
DRSAMSHAY.
to get that guide. And
Yeah.
then, okay, so what's one myth about the health or performance or anything that you focus on that you wish people would stop believing?
Um, God, there's so many. And I'm saying, and look, I've been the the myth is that it's one thing will fix you. That's the myth. That's the pharmaceutical myth. Pharmacy is great for stabilizing acute emergencies and stabilizing things from becoming an acute emergency, but that's not wellness. Like requiring a toxic substance, you might. I mean, I know plenty of people, including family members, that require pharmacy to stay functional. That's not shaming them. It's just, but to say that's healthy, that's completely not a thing. Like
Yeah.
that's stabilization. That's not health. And it's thinking there's one magic bullet. That's pharmaceutical thinking. That's not health. That's not healthy thinking. That's not. It's the same thing. Like you're trying to generate wealth. You're not. That's like lotto ticket shit. Sorry for the
Yeah.
language. Like that's you. It's a true health is a multifactorial approach involving experts and your own research and your own intuition and your personal advocacy. Just like wealth is not trying to buy lotto tickets, it's actually a discipline over time with
Mhm.
multifactorial, diversified approaches to ensure success, but also prevent catastrophe, that is moderated and coached by experts. It's the same thing. So I would really warn people against the myth of magic bullet therapy. Whether it's CoQ10 or goji berry juice up the nose or some magic meditation technique. It's not one thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I fully agree with that on you. And then, so finally, where can people learn more about your work and connect with you after this? I know we have your website, drsamshay.com, your social medias or anything like that if you want.
Yeah, so the best way is to get on my newsletter by going to my website and getting the free 3-day lifestyle nutrition guide. At the time of this recording, it is, if people want to schedule a free discovery call to see if what we discussed here in terms of labs and lifestyle is something they want to really work with a very seasoned practitioner with. The
Mhm.
other is I've got my DNA program, which is also available through my website. And then if people on the socials, I'm on YouTube. You can just put my name, Dr. Sam Shay, into YouTube. You can put my name, Dr. Sam Shay, into literally any podcast platform, and bunches of podcasts will pop up. My YouTube channel has an entire playlist on genetics, has an entire playlist on functional medicine, section on addiction, and it has in my comedy as well.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely be tuning into those things also myself. And I just want to say thank you for joining and just dropping a wealth of knowledge. You're an amazing and inspiration to see like what you've been doing and all the things that you've put together in your career and now what your focus is. I really truly think we need more people in the world like you that share the truth, um, and not just selling some type of whatever it is to get you just to get by, but also I like to be working at my peak performance. I want to be optimizing my energy in the day and my just everything. So thank you for sharing all that you did. And do you have any last words?
No, again, thank you for organizing this. It's just people like you that make it possible for the general public to be able to hear things like this they would never otherwise get access to. So really appreciate the educators and the coordinators to make this all possible.
Awesome. Well, that is a wrap for today with Keith Lockwood and Dr. Sam Shay. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, don't forget to go check out his website, drsamshay.com, and get on that newsletter. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Keith.